Hello, students. So, we come to the next chapter of Business Studies. The name of the chapter is Public, Private, and Global Enterprises. Here in this chapter, we shall be studying how the economy has been divided into two sectors, public and private, and the different types of public enterprises. So, there are all kinds of business organizations, small or large, industrial or trading, privately owned or government owned. Our Indian economy has been divided into two sectors, public sector and private sector. Now, let us check what is a private sector enterprise. A private sector enterprise consists of the business activities that is owned and run by private individuals. So there are different forms of organizations under the private and the public sector enterprises. You have already studied about the forms of private sector enterprises. Those are sole proprietorship, partnership, joint Hindu undivided family business, cooperative organizations, and joint stock company. You can refer to the previous lessons for the explanation of all the forms of private sector enterprises. Next is public sector enterprises. So, a public sector enterprise is one which is owned, managed, and controlled by the central government or any local authority. When we think about a business, the first thing or the main motive of that organization is to earn profit. But in a public sector enterprise, the main motive is to provide services to the public or public welfare. The people working in government organizations or public sector enterprises are known as government employees. Public sector enterprises has been categorized into departmental undertakings, statutory corporation, and government companies. Let us first study about departmental undertakings. This is the oldest and the most traditional form of organizing public enterprises. These enterprises are formed as different departments. These enterprises can be under the state government or the central government. Examples of such enterprises are railways and post and telegraph department. Some features of departmental undertakings are number one, the funding for different activities of these enterprises come from government treasury. Number two, these enterprises maintain accounting and goes through audit. Number three, the employees of public sector enterprises are known as government employees or government servants. And number four is departmental undertakings are considered to be the major subdivision of government enterprises and they are directly controlled by the ministry. Next, we come to the second category of public sector enterprises, that is statutory corporation. So, statutory corporations are the public sector enterprises brought into existence by a special act of the Parliament. Here I have used two words, act and Parliament. Now let us first learn about these words. An act is nothing but a law made by the Parliament. An act consists of rules and regulations to be followed by general public. Now there are many laws in our country, but a law becomes an act only if it is passed by the Parliament. So a Parliament makes a law into an act. So what is a Parliament? A Parliament is a branch of government who makes different laws. So, a statutory corporation is a public sector enterprise who has the power of the government, and also it can operate or work independently like a private enterprise. Now let us check some of its features. Number one, statutory corporations are set up under an act of the Parliament and are governed by the provisions of the act. This type of organization is wholly owned by the state. The government has the power to enjoy its profit. At the same time, the state also has to bear the losses, if any. Number three, this type of enterprises are run by the funds from the government or from the income generated by the public from sale of goods and services. Number four, a statutory corporation can sue or can be sued, enter into contracts, and also it can acquire property in its own name. Number five, a statutory corporation is not subject to accounting and audit procedures like the government undertakings. And lastly, number six, the employees of statutory corporation are not government employees or government servants and are not governed by the government rules and regulations. They are governed by the provisions of the Act itself. And the third category of public sector enterprises are the government companies. A government company is established under the Indian Companies Act 1956. According to the Indian Companies Act 1956, a government company means any company in which not less than 51% of the capital is issued by the central government or any state government or partly by both. These companies are established for purely business purposes. Their main and the only motive is to give competition to the private sector enterprises. This type of companies are controlled by the government. They can be called as private limited company or public limited company. The shares of the company are purchased on the name of the President of India. Now let us come to its features. Number one, it is an organization created by the Indian Companies Act 1956. Number two, the company can enter into a contract and can acquire property in its own name. Number three, the management of the company is regulated by the provisions of the Companies Act. Number four, these companies are exempted or not subjected to accounting and audit rules and procedures. And number five, the government companies obtain its funds from government shareholders and other private shareholders.